دوستان نهایت عزیز، سلام خدمت همه شما. امیدوارم جور صحتمند باشین. بازم از طریق چینل انگلیش کلاس به خدمت شما عزیزا هستم. البته موضوعی که امروز خدمت شما تقدیم میکنم، قسمی که میبینین بازم بخش داستان است، البته از یونت ششم و کتاب پنجم شما. خب میریم به طرف کلاس خود عزیزان. پیش از اینکه کلاس آغاز کنیم فراموش نکنین مثل همیشه چینل را حمایت کنین، با دوستایتان شیر کنین تا اونام سابسکرایب کنن و نظریاتشون شیر کنن. خب میریم به طرف کلاس خود، یونت ششم شما و کتاب پنجم، بخش داستان.
The island. Where am I? Bob thought to himself when he woke up on a peculiar beach.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. The island، جزیره. Where am I? Bob thought to himself when he woke up on a peculiar beach. میگه من کجا هستم؟ باب میگه وقتی که در ساحل عجیبی از خواب بیدار شد به خودش فکر کرد که من کجا هستم.
I can't remember what happened.
I can't remember what happened. به یاد آورده نمیتونم چی اتفاق افتاده.
There had been a bad storm and
There had been a bad storm. یک طوفان بسیار بد رخ داده بود.
Bob's fishing boat sank.
And Bob's fishing boat sank. و اینجا امو کشتی یا قایق ماهیگیری باب غرق شد.
He washed ashore on a small island.
He washed ashore on a small island. خب وقتی که کشتی او غرق شد او در یک جزیره کوچک به ساحل آمد.
But he had gotten hurt during the storm.
But he had gotten hurt during the storm. اما او در امی جریان یک زخم بسیار عمیق برداشته بود، یعنی در امی طوفان.
He had a terrible migraine.
He had a terrible migraine. و او یک سردردی شدید داشت.
And he had a fracture in his shoulder.
And he had a fracture in his shoulder. و یک شکستگی در شانه خود داشت.
He felt awful. But he had a strong desire to make it home to his spouse and children.
He felt awful. احساس بسیار خراب داشت. But he had a strong desire to make it home to his spouse and children. خب او یعنی میل بسیار شدید داشت یا علاقه بسیار زیاد داشت یا آرزویی داشت که برای یک خانه برای همسر و فرزندانش جور کنه.
He had to tolerate all the pain and devise a plan.
He had to tolerate all the pain and devise a plan. یعنی او باید تمام دردها را تحمل میکرد تا که نقشه میکشید. Where am I? Bob thought to himself when he woke up on a peculiar beach. I can't remember what happened. There had been a bad storm and Bob's fishing boat sank. He washed ashore on a small island, but he had gotten hurt during the storm. He had a terrible migraine and he had a fracture in his shoulder. He felt awful, but he had a strong desire to make it home to his spouse and children. He had to tolerate all the pain and devise a plan.
Bob stood up and looked around. I'll walk to a higher altitude.
Bob stood up and looked around. Bob وقتی که ایستاده شد چهار اطراف خود نگاه کرد. I'll walk to a higher altitude. گفت که فکر کرد که من به ارتفاع بالاتر خواهد رفت.
I can see everything around me.
So I can see everything around me. و من میتونم که همه چیزی که در اطراف من است ببینم.
Bob, maybe I'll gain some insight about this island and find something to help me escape.
Maybe I'll gain some insight about this island and find something to help me escape. و این با خودش میگه که شاید درباره این جزیره اطلاعات به دست بیارم یا اطلاعات پیدا کنم و چیزی پیدا کنم که به فرارم کمک کنه.
Along the mountain ridge.
As he walked along a mountain range, همی که از همون مرز کوها یا از باریکی های کوها می رفت.
Noticed that the tall indigenous trees looked sturdy and thick.
He noticed that the tall indigenous trees looked sturdy and thick. متوجه شد که درختای بلند و طبی یا بومی و یا محکم و بسیار ضخیم است.
Bob got a brilliant idea.
Bob got a brilliant idea. یک نظر خوب در ذهنش آمد.
He could build a raft.
He could build a raft. او یک قایق میتونه که بسازه.
He cut down some leaves and tree limbs.
He cut down some leaves and tree limbs. او بعضی برگا و بعضی قسمت‌های از درخت قطع کرد.
Even though his shoulder injury impaired his ability to carry the materials,
Even though his shoulder injury impaired his ability to carry the materials, گرچه که شانش زخمی شده بود، اوگار شده بود یا آسیب دیده بود، توانایی را نداشت که انتقال بده مواد.
he slowly dragged them down the mountain until he reached the coastline.
He slowly dragged them down the mountain until he reached the coastline. خب اونا را آهسته آهسته به طرف بارامی اونا را به پایین کوه کش کرد و تا که به مو خط ساحل رسید. یعنی با آهستگی اونا را کش کرد به پایین کوه آورد تا که به خط ساحل رسید. Even though his shoulder injury impaired his ability to carry the materials, he slowly dragged them down the mountain until he reached the coastline. Bob was a proficient builder. Bob یک سازنده بسیار ماهر بود.
He used his building expertise to line up the limbs and tie them together with long vines.
He used his building expertise to line up the lamps and tie them together with long vines. خب او یعنی از مو تخصص ساختمانیش برای ردیف کردن قسمت‌ها و بسته کردن آن به از مو قسمت‌های درخت و بسته کردن آن به تاک‌های بلند استفاده کرد.
When the raft was finished, Bob was happy with his work.
When the raft was finished, وقتی که قایقش خلاص شد, Bob was happy with his work. Bob بسیار خوشحال بود, از کارش راضی بود.
This will bring me home to my family, he said with a smile.
This will bring me home to my family, he said with a smile. او گفت که این مرا خانه پیش خانواده میرسانه.
This will bring me home to my family, he said with a smile. At last, Bob was ready to implement his escape plan.
At last, Bob was ready to implement his escape plan. بالاخره یعنی باب آماده شد که تا نقشه‌ای که داشت او را آماده کنه و اجرا کنه.
With all his might, he thrust the raft into the water.
With all his might, he thrust the raft into the water. با تمام تواناییش قایقش در داخل آب انداخت.
He climbed on and began the quest to find his way home.
He climbed on and began the quest to find his way home. و بالایش بالا شد و شروع کرد به جستجو کردن و پالیدن خانه‌اش که راهش پیدا کنه.
Bob smiled again and thought, I'm glad I kept a good attitude.
Bob smiled again and thought. باز هم با خودش تبسم کرد و فکر کرد که I'm glad I kept a good attitude. و گفت من خرسند هستم یا خوشحال هستم که یک یادداشت خوبی داشتم یا یک نگرش خوبی داشتم.
It prevented the pain from deterring me from my plan.
It prevented the pain from deterring me from my pain. یعنی این مانع ما یعنی درد مانع ما نشد، نتونست که مانع ما شود که من تا از پلان خود دست بردار شوم.
Optimism and ambition make anything possible.
Optimism and ambition make anything possible. یعنی خوشبینی و یعنی کسی که خوشبین می باشه یا جا طلب می باشه یعنی همه چیز برش ممکن می باشه.
Slowly he floated out to sea.
Slowly he floated out to sea. آیسته آیسته او از یعنی شناور شد یعنی بر روی آب حرکت کرد.
In a few days he made it to shore and ran home to see his happy family.
In a few days he made it to shore and ran home to see his happy family. و او چند روز بعد به ساحل رسید و برای دیدن خانواده شادش به خانه دوید و به خانه رفت. At least Bob was ready to implement his escape plan. With all his might, he thrust the raft into the water. He climbed on and began the quest to find his way home. Bob smiled again and thought, I'm glad I kept a good attitude. It prevented the pain from deterring me from my plan. Optimism and ambition make anything possible. Slowly he floated out to sea. In a few days he made it to shore and ran home to see his happy family. خب دوستای عزیز، این بود درس امروز شما جنوت ششم و بخش داستان خدمت شما تقدیم کردم. امیدوار هستم که درس مورد علاقه شما قرار گرفته باشه. تا درس بعدی که بازم به خدمت شما عزیزا می باشم، شما رو به خداوند یکتا میسپارم. روز همه شما خوش. خداوند یار و مددگار.